Let's get to the heart of this conversation. There is a sighting, a Jesus sighting that happened about 2,000 years ago.
Well, my goodness, that is an interesting way to start. You've managed to somehow make Jesus sound like the pigging Yeti, or perhaps Bigfoot. And you know what? I buy that more than a guy who magicked himself back from the dead. Because at the very least, human-shaped animals actually exist. Also, much like the Bible never explicitly says that Jesus wasn't a raptor, they also never said that he wasn't an 8-foot-tall hair monster with gigantic teeth. And frankly, it's a little bit more likely than most of his usual depictions.
And they say the tomb is empty. What evidence do we have today that gives us confidence that the resurrection is a historical fact?
It is very hard to resist the urge to say, none, lol. But that's just the r/Reddit atheist in me that doesn't exist, because I'm not sure if I've even been on that specific webpage, let alone frequent it, which always makes the "you are Reddit man" accusations as funny as they are incredibly stupid. But of course, there's always evidence for any claim, if you're willing to look hard enough and bend it away from its more obvious conclusions. So, as always, it is simply really bad evidence. So if that is your standard, probably loads.
So there's at least 20 to 21 arguments for the empty tomb that cumulatively make a powerful case.
I'm not sure why I found that so funny. Maybe it's the specifically 20 to 21, as if it could be 20.5 as one of the possibilities. And also, that's arguments, not evidence, which is even better. But then, of course, topped off with for an empty room, really. The existence of a space that has nothing in it, no matter what it's supposed to be for, is not the same thing as really any kind of proof that someone literally defied all currently understood laws of physics. All it is, if it existed at all, is a box.
One of the most compelling is in regards to who discovered the empty tomb.
Who discovered it is the most compelling bit. Well, unless it was a frigging time traveler specifically sent back to figure out what was really going on, I really doubt who is going to matter so much as if we can demonstrate that they both did, and that what such a discovery would actually mean if it happened at all. That, or I suppose if Honest Dave found it, because, well, he never lies. What's that, Honest Dave? Everyone should subscribe to my channel and check out my Patreon. What an interesting and factually accurate thing to say.
Now, all four Gospels report that women discover the empty tomb.
Ugh, it's the women thing. Man, people who still throw that one out, you can frankly immediately dismiss anything that they have to say beyond that, especially if they consider it one of the most compelling. I have said it before and I'll say it again, even if the "woman's can't be trusted" concept was a widely held position of the time, in fact, especially if that, then the rhetorical device of, wow, they were so confident that they were right, they were happy to admit the wankers found it first. And you know what they say about the wankers? Those guys won't even drink lighter fluid.
The wankers don't drink it because they can't afford it.
It's not revelation, it's writing. And cliched writing at that.
We read that in our modern culture and we don't think twice about it. But in that patriarchal culture, a woman was typically not educated the same way as a man.
Well, aside from the fact that I do not know what world you are living in, but there's some very over-the-top people who the very whiff of a woman in a story sends them into an apoplectic rage. But ignoring that, what difference would it make how educated they are? If a person with a high education and one without witness a train crash, neither is somehow more or less credible as a witness to the event. That's not how that works. Credibility is about, were you there? Can anyone attest to that? Do your eyes work? Whether or not you have read the great works of philosopher McGee or know pi to 4,000 digits is completely irrelevant.
In fact, there's some ancient Jewish proverbs, not in the scriptures, that says, better the words of the law burnt than delivered to women. They were looked down upon.
Again, so what? I mean, it's not good, obviously, but in this context, it means less than nothing. Whoever witnessed a thing, witnessed a thing. What's weird is that there was apparently this unit of ladies roaming the streets, and somehow not a single man in sight for miles and miles around. Really makes me think of the old ladies in pink dresses from Fallout New Vegas, running around and beating the shit out of couriers. And frankly, that would be a far more compelling narrative. Even Maud's muggers saw the resurrection and promptly robbed Jesus for all the bottle caps he had. You know, that's probably why they never found any of them in his tomb either. Makes perfect sense.
And so put yourself in the position of the gospel writers.
Okay, let me just get into it. Right. I am a lying piece of shit, and I want everyone to accept this ludicrous story I have written about an event that everybody will understand is nonsense. How do I trick them into believing, instead of just telling the truth and not spreading my bullshit religious claims for whatever asinine reason that I'm doing that for? Okay, I think I got it.
If they're inventing a story of an empty tomb, and they want to convince people that this is true, who are the least likely witnesses they would invent, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to be persuasive? And the answer is they obviously wouldn't invent women. That would be counterproductive.
Nope, it would be exactly what they wanted to do. Make idiots like you go, see, it must be true, because blah, 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 frickety blah. And then yet more idiots eat that shit up like it's covered in delicious whiskey. But anyone with a half-functioning brain cell will roll their eyes at the whole tiresome act.
So the reason they report women, the most likely reason...
Well, I don't know what your most likely reason is going to be, but I would say the most likely reason, and it's the same for basically all of it, is that they were engaging in a little bit of what we call myth-making. And the thing about myth-making is it's almost never about the literal truth, but about some greater one, at least from their perspective. And it's something that all writers do to lesser or greater extents. Many stories, whether based on real events or explicitly fictional ones, tell you things about the world, either as it is or as the writer thinks it ought to be. But that doesn't mean that they're right, either in doing so or their wants, just that that is a thing that they are attempting.
Is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John heard a story that they believe, and they're passing on what they think is true. So that's one reason that it's kind of called the criterion of embarrassment, that people don't invent material to intentionally embarrass themselves and disparage their message.
Yes, they absolutely do. Like, seriously, it's basic humanization. People are far more likely to be invested in something that seems grounded and flawed than something that's seemingly perfectly packaged. A smarter theist might argue that no, you don't understand. The reason the Bible is nonsensical gibberish is because it makes it more down to earth and relatable. God's not the grand sky man's, he's just like you and me. You would find him at the pub. He gets his sleeves caught on door handles. He is just one of the guys, and that's why the book is so stupid. Honestly, it sounds better than this shit.
So when writers include that, it's because they care more about truth than the perception.
Sure, you keep telling yourself that, mate. I mean, you know exactly what they were thinking, right? As with all apologetic dipshits, you're not only mind readers, but mind readers across time and space. Makes about as much sense as anything else you've said, frankly.
So women discovering the empty tombs is very, very significant. There's more than this. Another one I think is interesting is that Jesus was buried in Jerusalem.
Well, thank Christ that there is something else. I thought you were never going to get past I don't trust women, therefore women never lie, however the hell that's supposed to work. Also, Jesus was buried in Jerusalem, was he? Just gonna skip right past that the guy in your story existed in the way that you told at all, and that if he did die, well, it was definitely in the specific place that is apparently helpful to your cause. And of course that he was buried and not, say, left for carrion or thrown in a hole like most, if not all other criminals being executed by the state would likely have been. Now,
what's interesting about this is if you're going to go invent a story that's not true, The hardest place to do this would be in Jerusalem.
First off, a lie is told where a lie is told, or at least it's set wherever it is being set. The difficulty is, again, irrelevant, and again, regardless of whatever reasoning he comes up with, or again, if true, possibly because of it. The whole, well, you wouldn't have told the lie here because that would have been so brazen, so easy to check. So this, that, and the other. I continue to wonder, on what planet do you live? No matter what side of any given fence that you sit on, you believe, if not outright know, that often the people that you find yourself in conflict with will say the most obviously and outrageously untrue shit. It happens all the time. And according to your sources, whether they're accurate or not, what they're saying is definitely bullshit, and yet the people who agree with them continue to do so anyway. The unfortunate fact is, for many, truth is entirely optional to the validity of their claims.
Because somebody would say, okay, wait a minute, we actually know Joseph of Arimathea. We know the name of the person who had the tomb that buried Jesus. That's pretty amazing 2,000 years later. And his position of authority.
Well, fun fact, Joseph of Arimathea is highly contested as a historical figure specific to this claim, and one who is apparently weirdly useful for the specific narrative trying to be told. So the fact that he turns up and helps the story so much, well, it smacks of Deus Ex Machina. But even if he's totally real, doesn't he turn up in writings like 40 years after the fact? There's no reason to think that if they were the duplicitous little shits they sound like, they wouldn't have picked a somewhat known figure and dropped him in for a little historical quote-unquote authenticity. And considering his apparent importance, it's odd that you are surprised that people made sure the guy that they need to stay in the story stays in the story. It's a bit like being surprised that no one forgot about Andrew or Matthew or Smormu, key characters that don't tend to get forgotten about.
They just go check his tomb and see if the body was there. But they don't. Why? Because the body's gone.
I'm sorry, I think my brain just rebooted. Did you say that they could go to check the tomb, but they didn't check because the body was gone? Well, then how the hell did they know that? Seriously, if someone tells me, hey, this impossible thing happened, I'm not just going to turn around and start telling all my friends. I'm going to go check to make sure they aren't full of shit. Or more likely, do nothing, because ain't nobody got time for that. I mean, to confirm and likely refute every last thing some random asshole tells you, especially something you probably just don't care about. You will nod and smile and then forget about the whole thing so you can go back to playing, I don't know, what did they play for fun back then? Pong? Yeah, probably Pong.
So the apostles go preach the risen Jesus in Jerusalem, the very city Jesus was publicly crucified and buried in a known tomb, minimally shows incredible confidence that the tomb itself was empty.
Or that assuming any of that took place at all when no one gives a shit about the claims of some fringe cult, they tend not to give a shit about the claims of some fringe cult. It's like hearing that there's a stone in the shape of my face at my local pub. But you also know that I say a lot of crazy shit. So that's yet another of my unlikely claims. Are you actually going to check? Or are you going to go, course there is, buddy, and pat me on the head? It's this weird main character syndrome shit Christianity has. Probably because of how big it is today. But back then, you guys would have just been another random group of assholes that hardly anyone listened to. So why would they give a shit when you made yet another wacky claim? Whoop-de-doo.
That's a second one. I'll give you a third one as quickly. It's the first explanation for the empty tomb.
Okay, wow, that was sudden and cool. At least you're keeping the pace up now and got past the women bit. Won't ask why that was such a focus, but sure. The first explanation for an empty tomb. Well, I'll give you one. No one was put in there in the first place because, again, why the hell would they? The Romans were pretty famous for their procedure and their brutality. To give someone a horrific execution, but then an honorable burial makes no goddamn sense. Almost like it was made up to fit a supernatural narrative.
Is that the religious leaders say that the apostles stole the body. That's the explanation.
I would bet that the religious leaders didn't say anything, but then many years later were randomly quoted as having said something that just so happened to be perfectly useful for your cause. I imagine if they had actually said anything about the guy specifically, it would be along the lines of, who? I'm so sorry, we execute so many zealots lately, I can't be expected to be on first name bases with all of them.
If they say they stole the body, what are they assuming about the state of the tomb?
That it pissing exists at all? And again, that would be weird. Like, wait, what? We put who in a tomb? Why did we do that? The guy was executed in our apparently most brutal and humiliating way, and then he gets the burial of someone we aren't trying to make an example of. Again, why the shit would they do that?
That it's empty.
That it's empty, right? You don't say to your teacher something like, my dog ate my homework, if you have your homework.
You very well might, if you realized that you completely screwed up the assignment, or you'd seen a classmate's version of the homework and realized that you were going to get a terrible score. Or hell, that you had done some of it, but not all of it, and you just needed a little more time. There's a ton of reasons that you might want to do so. But, it's the whole point of the story. Oh, see, they weren't saying what tomb, or who, or what are you people doing in my office? Because, of course, they are taking meetings with the known cranks who constantly try to do shit to annoy them, and are now demanding proof for things that don't make any sense. So, of course, they give answers that perfectly align with the story that we want to tell. But you do have to take our word for it, that is, in fact, what they said. Honestly, it's amazing just how cooperative these characters are. Almost like they were made up.
So the first explanation from the religious leaders is the apostles stole the body, which shows that the body was gone and the tomb was empty. Now, we could talk about whether or not it's reasonable for the apostles to steal their body, and I mainly think it's not reasonable because, number one, they had to get by the guard.
The guard, you say, of the random tomb of one of countless executed. And to defend that body from what exactly? Seriously, the more details you give to try and add credibility strips it away to the point of utter absurdity. I mean, even if we give you this hypothetical guard, are guards immune from sleep? Are guards immune from bribery? Are guards immune from needing to have goddamn pisses that they are unlikely to just do in a random cemetery or whatever you call a tomb storage facility? Like, even if this wasn't stupid from the very get, the details that come in later only serve to make it more stupid, not less.
But number two, why would they go out and willingly suffer and be willing to die for something if they stole a body and knew it was false?
Again, and we're just giving you absolutely everything to this point, but you still miss a fundamental flaw. People die and suffer and everything else for false beliefs all the time. People will martyr themselves for causes they believe in all the time. People do things that are otherwise completely irrational to anyone else all the time. It doesn't matter if things are strictly true, because again, it's like with the myth making. If you thought you were starting something more true than facts, you may very well die for a lie. Members of cults will drink Kool-Aid that they themselves poisoned for the much greater truth. That doesn't make them right. It makes them humans who are capable of believing anything, so long as it suits them, even if it harms them. The deeply religious do it to this very day. You think that creationists like these two goofs don't know that they constantly have to lie to keep their truth alive? Of course they do. They do it anyway, and then they suppress it deep down because that real truth is far more important than their credibility. I mean, it's not like they had any in the first place. Bye!